Hi, it's time for an October wrap-up. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. If you're new here, I talk about books and writing, and today we are going to talk about all the books I read in October. First, a little bit of banter, if you will. I have a coughing child upstairs. I'm sorry. I think that I'm kind of made my peace with the fact that I will not have all my kids healthy until maybe like March. So there's going to be a lot of coughing kids in the background of these videos, and there's not much I can do about it. Secondly, how are we as a group feeling about this sweater? I got it from Stitch Fix, which I absolutely love, but I usually don't get sweaters that have like this kind of stuff. And I'm feeling very like my mom 1998, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I know the 90s are back, which is weird for me having already lived through them and worn all these fashions. I'm currently wearing very wide leg jeans that I think I would have owned also in 1998. My brain is super scattered today. I have no real decor up because I took my Halloween decorations down, except for my little birds. And I don't put up Thanksgiving decor, but I'm also like a person who cannot do Christmas in November. So my shelves are going to be a little bare. They're going to look like just general non-festive-y for the next couple weeks. I'm doing Nano, and Nano's like pressing on my brain nonstop. So I've been quite busy with that, but it's going well. And lastly, I read a book this week that broke my heart absolutely so badly. I've cried about it. I finished the book 3 days ago, and I cried about it this morning again. I think for like the fifth time crying about it, and I can't let it go. And it's like one of those book hangovers where I'm like, I just need it to be over. Also, I read this book in November, so you're not going to find out today what that book was. So stay tuned for my November wrap up. Or if you're super mad about it, just comment and I'll respond to your comment and let you know what book it was. Let's get into the wrap up. I read 8 books in October, which is kind of crazy considering I did like a vlog check-in in October in the mid-month and told you guys how like I was in terrible book slumps and I couldn't read anything, and then I ended up reading 8 books, so I should have been quiet about it. But they weren't necessarily things that were on my TBR, which I think is the problem. I was having a hard time getting into the books that I put on my TBR, so some of them were not. Let's start with fantasy. The first fantasy I read in October was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. There's the cover. I got it from the library, but I checked it out in early September and I felt like I had to return it instead of holding on to it until the absolute beginning of November. This book, I would say, is a solid read. So the premise of this story is that we have 4 women who are friends from when they were teenagers, and they are witches, and they are in Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is kind of like government witchery. They're not all in it anymore, but they were all in it at one point. They also all survived this like witchy civil war that happened when they were in their 20s, and a lot of their loved ones died in it. Now that they're in their more like mid-30s, there's this prophecy that Leviathan will rise, and they don't exactly know what that will mean other than it's going to change the landscape of witchcraft forever. And the conflict in the book is that these friends are disagreeing about who Leviathan might be and what it actually might mean for witchcraft. So this book was written sort of as like a response to Harry Potter because of J.K. Rowling's like anti-trans stuff that's been coming out. So there are trans characters in here. There's not a lot, but there are some queer characters, some people of color. My biggest reasons not rating this higher was I didn't like all the narrators at all. So there are several narrators. There are 2 main narrators, and one of the main narrators I did really like. Other narrators have smaller parts. There's one person in particular. I don't want to like give anything away. So there's one person in particular who I was shocked didn't have a bigger part just because of what this book was like supposed to represent. But another thing that bothered me is, and this is a spoiler, so jump ahead like 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. The villain is one of the narrators. And if I'm going to be in the head of a villain, you have to sell to me their evil plan and why they're doing this to like an insane amount. If I'm in their brain, I need to like almost believe them where they're going with it. And I did not feel that at all. So I don't know. This book is a series. I don't think I'm going to read the next one. This was for my book club, and my friend who picked it said she's going to read the next one. The ending also was something that I was like, are you kidding? So she's going to read the next one and then let me know what that ending was, and then I'll decide whether or not I'm going to read it. So Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, solid read. The next fantasy I read was Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young, and this I would say is a high solid read. So I wouldn't quite put it in the great section, but I did like it better than Her Majesty's Royal Coven. So this has kind of a dual timeline. The majority of it takes place in present day, but we get a lot of flashbacks to when the narrators were in their teens, and even a couple when they're younger than that. But we have two main narrators, August and Emery, but there's a ton of other narrators. There are some narrators who only have like one chapter, and they live on this island called Saoirse, and Saoirse is an island off the coast of Washington or Oregon. I can't remember. It's in the Pacific Northwest, and everyone there is magical. And it's kind of like a tourist destination, so people only come in the summer and fall, but then the rest of the year, it's just the witchy people that live there. So our main two narrators are August and Emery, and they've been sort of like linked since they were children, and romantically so in their teen years. And something happens when they are 18 that's a horrible tragedy, and it causes August to abandon Emery. And so the book takes place though when they're 34, and she still isn't over it. Like, she still cannot get over that he abandoned her. August has to come back to Saoirse because his mother has died and she wants her ashes there. And so in coming back, he does have to see Emery, and then it goes from there. There's sort of a mystery that unravels throughout this. This book felt very much like the book Practical Magic, not the movie, which have two completely different feels, in that the witchcraft felt a little bit more magical realism to me than like high witchcraft. Now, I do say that with a grain of salt because I read so many witchy things that I feel like now, if witches aren't like throwing fireballs for me, I'm like, this isn't fantasy, this is magical realism. So it is classified as a fantasy by Book of the Month, but for me, it didn't feel like high fantasy. Here's something I loved about this book. Adrienne Young killed the emotional connection between August and Emery. It was so good. She wrote it so well. Sometimes because I read so much romance, when I read a non-romance and there's a relationship in it, I get a little like, this isn't good. This was so good. Their relationship was fantastic. She did a really good job with like the whole like feeling like you're fated to be together. Wonderful. I really also loved the setting because we read a lot of witchy books that are set on islands, but they're usually set on the East Coast. I say, as a person who has a witchy book coming out in 2024 that takes place on an island off the coast of Massachusetts. So the Pacific Northwest feel was very fun. My main critique of this book is that the beginning was very slow. It took me a really long time to get into it, and it never felt very like unputdownable. It felt enjoyable, but not like it was like grasping me to read it. There is a twist because of the mystery, and I did guess the twist early on, but I didn't think it really like took away from the feel of the book. Also, the aesthetics of this book are fantastic. Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young, a high solid read. So now we're going to move on to romance. I read 2 romances in October. The first one was Called to the Deep by Desiree Nicolay, and I love this book. This is a Put It in My Veins 5-star read. Fantastic. It's going to be one of my best books of the year. So we open with Captain Killian, who is a fishing boat captain off the coast of Maine, and he gets a distress call from a boat. And when he and his crew get there, the boat is destroyed, and there's only one survivor in like a life vest type thing floating, but there are no other bodies. There are no bodies, which is very odd. I don't know a lot about shipwrecks, but in this book, it makes it seem like it's very odd not to find at least another body or two hanging around. They save this woman. Lorelai, who is this woman, has no idea what happened. She doesn't remember anything about what happened after the ship sank and she was in the water. But then she starts getting these weird like dreams/visions of what actually happened then. And then she also notices some very weird physical changes about herself. And at the same time, she's got a budding romance with Captain Killian, who saved her. But after deducing a few things, she realizes that she's actually a mermaid, and these mermaids eat people. So she's starting to crave people, which is putting a little bit of a damper on her budding romance with Captain Killian. But this book was so good. First of all, the vibes are amazing because it's coastal Maine in the fall and mermaids. So I mean, like, what else do you want? Seriously? The romance between Captain Killian and Lorelai is fantastic. I loved how Desiree built the mermaid mythology because it's really cool and it goes very in depth. And there's also a ton of like ecology built into this story, which was also amazing to read. there's going to be another one. It's a duology. It comes out in early 2023, if I'm remembering correctly. I will definitely read it and review it for you. Call to the Deep by Desiree Nicolay. Put it in my veins. So next I have Lover Eternal by J.R. Ward. This is book 2 in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, which is like a 20-book series. Okay, here's the thing about this. I had heard about this series for a really long time, but never wanted to get into it because it's so long. And then one of my critique partners told me I needed to read it because it would be a good comp title for something that I have coming out later this year. So the main character in this one is Rage, Rhage, and all the Black Dagger Brotherhoods have like weird names with like it's like Rage and Vicious and Fury, but they're like spelled funky. And he is a like vampire assassin, and he also was cursed to have this beast like live within him. And if he doesn't feed the beast with like violence or sex or whatever, it comes out. So that's our hero. Our heroine is a woman named Mary who's a social worker, and she has cancer. So they're very opposites. But basically what happens is Mary finds this kid who needs help, and she offers to translate for him because he doesn't speak, and she does speak sign language, and it throws her into the vampire world. Rage meets her and is like, oh, I think this is the one for me. Okay. This book is very 2006. Let me just say that for starters. It's very 2006. Our hero wears leather pants. He wears a floor-length leather trench coat. It's very much the aesthetic of like Buffy and Angel. If you watch that now or you watched it then, that's like what I pictured these guys looking like. I really pictured Rage looking like Spike from Buffy, if you know who that is. That's who that is. Also, there's like weird 2006 stuff in it. Like the word metrosexual is in here, which I hadn't heard that word in so long after hearing it all the time when I was like in high school and college that it like shocked me when I saw it. Things like the hero won't cry in front of the heroine, and that doesn't get resolved. Like sometimes in romance novels that'll happen and it'll be like he finally could let go and show emotion in front of the woman he loves. That's not how this ends. He does not cry in front of her. Look, here's the thing. It all worked for me. It worked for me. But it might not work for you. In 2006, I was like 23, I think. And so it felt comfortable to me. If you're a younger romance reader, I don't know if it'll feel comfortable to you, but if you're around my age, it probably will. I think that I will read more in the series, but I'm not going to read the entire series because like I want to read Vicious's book, which I think is next because there's like kind of a cliffhanger at the end about with him and like who I assume his heroine's going to be. But like I don't care to read all of the books. I'll jump around. But it was fun. Lover Eternal, J.R. Ward, great. Okay, now we're going to move on to thrillers, which I also read 2 thrillers. 2 fantasy, 2 romance, 2 thrillers, and then 2 question mark, unless you looked at the chapters. The first thriller I read was The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. It was my book of the month pick for October, and this was a solid read. So our main character, narrator, is Harry, female Harry. She is a breakout best-selling author. She wrote a book that just like took over. She's from London. She has recently moved to New York to be with her fiance, Edward. Edward is like old American money. He has a very wealthy, like generational wealthy family. They make obscene amount of money. Like the money is just crazy. They talk in the billions. And his family is also very weird and a little dark. And they play really disturbing games. So going into this, I thought this was going to be like the movie Ready or Not, which I did not watch because I can't watch horror movies, but I did see the previews for, and I might have even like, sometimes if a horror movie looks interesting to me, I like read the Wikipedia page to find out what happened, which I might have done. I can't remember. As the holiday season approaches and Harry ends up doing a lot of stuff with Edward's family, she realizes that her personal deadly secret might be at risk. And she has to kind of go along with all of this stuff to keep her secret safe. Here's my verdict on it. This was good, not great. It has amazing vibes for like late autumn, early winter. So I did read this right at the beginning of October, which might have been part of the problem because it takes place from Thanksgiving to Christmas. So like this is a great book to read now in November or even like the beginning of December. It definitely like felt the way she describes like New York City in winter, and then they're in upstate New York, and the weather and like the decorations and the excess of the rich family was fantastic. Part of the reason I don't have this in the great is I didn't necessarily feel like everything Harry was doing was worth it. So she has this secret she wants to keep safe, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't feel worth it to me, if that makes sense. I hope it does. But I do think this would be a really fun book to like binge in a weekend in November when it's like cold and creepy out and maybe snowing. So if you have a weekend like that, pick up The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. My next thriller is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James, which I did get as an add-on from Book of the Month. And this book was great, and it might eventually shift to Put It in My Veins. A lot of times, like my Put It in My Veins books, I have to like ruminate on it for about a month to see if I still feel that intensely into it after I've let it sit with me for a while. This is a thriller with two timelines. So the first timeline is 2014, I think. Yes, 2014. And Fiona Sheridan is our main character. She's a journalist. 20 years earlier, her older sister was murdered and her body was like dumped in a field next to this abandoned school called Idlewild Hall. And Fiona has never felt right about her sister's boyfriend's conviction. So he is in jail for the murder, but it just always kind of bothered her. Our other timeline is in 1950. We're following 4 teenage girls who go to Idlewild Hall. Originally, when I picked this up, I thought it was going to be like a Mary Magdalene house, and it's not. So these are mostly girls who just don't have a place in the world. One of our narrators in the past is a illegitimate child to a really wealthy man. One has, she's living with her aunt and uncle who really don't want her, stuff like that. Some behavioral issues, but no one is pregnant, which is what I was thinking it was going to be. In the present timeline, when a body is found on the grounds, Fiona needs to figure out what happened in the past and also what happened to her sister and how everything relates. This has some supernatural elements in like the best way. So sometimes supernatural elements in thrillers kind of bother me, but it did not bother me at all in this one. I loved it. This takes place entirely in November, so it's a perfect book to read this month, and it's so creepy. November's kind of a creepy month, let's be honest. It's like cold, but there's usually not snow. It's usually gray. There's just dead leaves everywhere. There's no like beautiful red leaves on the tree anymore. So it's a really good creepy month, and this was a really good book. Simone St. James killed the historical setting. Fantastic. I couldn't believe how much she fit into this book because it's not that long. It is just over 300 pages, and there was so much in it to sink your teeth into. Great read. Maybe Put It in My Veins. Did make me purchase the Cold Case Files to read at some point in the next couple of months. The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. All right, let's move on to nonfiction. I read 2 nonfiction books this month, which is weird for me. If it's your first time here, you'll see that I don't really read nonfiction. But they're definitely like my vein nonfiction. So the first one was Design Mom, How to Live with Kids, a Room-by-Room Guide by Gabrielle Stanley Blair. She's currently like very big. So she wrote Ejaculate Responsibly, which has come out recently, and she's a mom of 6 kids, and it's basically like a response to the abortion conversation happening in the United States right now and how men have to be careful with their sperm. And I don't know if I'm going to read that book, but I think I might buy it and save it for my kids when they get a little older as like something for them to read when they're in high school. But that's, if you recognize her name, that might be why. This is her first book, and it's not about that at all. It's about how to make your house work for your family. So this is very specific to me and not to many people out on BookTube watching. If you feel like your house isn't working for your family, read this book because as you can see, I marked it up a ton. I even took notes when I was reading it, and I do have to return to the library. I don't want to, but you have to actually read this book. So I gave this 5 stars, Put It in My Veins. It was fantastic. And then I went on Goodreads and was reading the reviews, and people were like, it's nothing but pretty pictures. Okay, so here's the thing. You clearly didn't read the book because I like to look at design books as much as the next person. I have a stack over there of design books that I'm not reviewing because I didn't actually read the text. I only looked at the pictures. This has very good text in it. If you actually want to learn something from it, you have to read the words. No one wants to look at pictures of regular people's family rooms with bins and bins of toys, even if they're organized, because that's not aesthetically pleasing. But the information she has next to it is very important. So if you get this book, make sure you read the words. You don't just look at the beautiful pictures, but it is a beautiful book to look at also because a design book does need to be beautiful. So that's Design Mom by Gabrielle Stanley Blair. put it in my veins, but maybe not necessarily in all of yours. I didn't technically read this book, but I'm going to show it to you. And it is Domino, Your Guide to a Stylish Home. And it's by the Domino editors, Jessica Ram Perez and Shani Silver. And I'm not reviewing this because I didn't read this cover to cover. I only review books that I actually read cover to cover, all of the text. But this was a fantastic design book. Also, if you are into interior design, it was really, really good. And there's really cool, like, how to decide if you want this kind of seating. What do you want your walls to look like? What do you want your art to look like? I really enjoyed looking at it. The pictures are gorgeous. I'm not going to review it because I can't, because I didn't read the words. My next nonfiction book was also another one that's like very specific to me. And it was Romancing Your Plan, Taking Your Genre Fiction Marketing to the Next Level by Zoe York. So I got it on my Kindle. Here you go. Put this in my veins again, but it might not be for you. If you write genre fiction, read this series. So I've read 2 out of the 3 books. I'm going to read the third one probably in December or January. These books are so unbelievably helpful. I took 20 pages of notes reading this book. And I think this book is probably only about 150 pages long, because I feel like when you're an indie author, there's so much secrecy about like how to market, how to do these things, because indie authors are, they work really hard to get the information that they've learned. Zoe York is great about sharing information. She doesn't have a perfect, formula for figuring out your marketing, but there's so much good information in here. A lot of stuff I hadn't thought about, and it's really making me rethink sort of like my social media footprint going forward from here. If you're any kind of writer, you should read this because it was really, really good. It's also very inexpensive on Kindle, and you could probably get it from your library. I'm sure libraries have it. And let me see, if I had read this series before I released my books under Lucy Hudson's landscape would look very different. And I might still be publishing under her instead of just like saying goodbye. Okay, lastly, I did want to add that I did officially DNF a book. And it's always hard for me to like actually take it off my Goodreads currently reading, but I had to. So I DNF'd In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. Here's the thing. First of all, I went into this book all wrong because everyone said it was the best one in the series. I think that's my least favorite out of the 3 and whatever I've read so far. But I had the audio and I just could not with the audio. I could not. I'm not an audiobook listener. I don't have a lot of time where I'm alone in my car. I usually have my kids in my car with me. I don't have a ton of time in which I listen to audiobooks. I mean, seriously, when I clean my kitchen, I either want to listen to a podcast or I want to listen to music. I don't want to listen to an audiobook. So I did officially DNF it with so little left. I had like an hour of audio left, which is probably like 30 minutes of reading. So if I ever find myself in a library, my library doesn't have it, the one I use constantly, and I see the hard copy or a bookstore, I'm going to park myself and read the end of the book so I can say that I finished it. Because I'm not going to stop reading the series, because this one was kind of like different than the rest of the series, if that makes sense. There's like books that follow one timeline, books 1 and 3, and then there's kind of like cutout books, and this was a cutout book. So I really want to still find out what happens to everybody else from books 1 and 3. This one just was not for me at all, and that's that. So that's my October wrap up. 8 books, not bad. November's going to be way lower because of NaNoWriMo. I hope you had a wonderful month of reading. I hope you read all the thrillers, witchy books, horror books, scary books. Maybe all you had read was rom-coms, and that's fine. That you wanted to read in the spooky month of October. Or maybe you read whatever you felt like it, because I'm a big proponent of that. If you're still watching, thank you so much for hanging out. I'll see you soon in my next video. Drop me an emoji of your favorite genre. So a heart for romance, a sword for fantasy, a spaceship for sci-fi, and let me know what kind of genres you like to read the best. As always, I hope you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.